Today we talk about that game. Castlevania Chronicles was released back in 2001. If you've kept up with my previous videos on Castlevania, you may be wondering why I'm skipping ahead here. I mean, there are quite a few Castlevania games that released between Chronicles and the Game Boy version of Kid Dracula. But you see, Castlevania Chronicles is actually just an enhanced port of a much older Castlevania game. Said game being simply titled Castlevania, released in 1993 for the X6800, a home computer which was only ever sold in Japan. As the name suggests, it is yet another retelling of Castlevania 1. Jesus Christ, were Konami just allergic to originality back then? This is the fourth time we are going through this plot. And also, could Konami have really not given this game a subtitle? It just makes talking about the game much more of a hassle than it should be. It is one of my least favorite modern trends and I hate that Konami started it back in 1993. Compared to Castlevania 4, the X6800 game falls much closer to the original Castlevania, as it does borrow a few of its set pieces and level chunks. But still, around 80% of it is comprised of entirely new content. The X6800 flopped hard, only selling around 150,000 units. Which is why it made sense for Konami to later port the game to the far more popular PlayStation 1. This is why I think it makes more sense to look at Castlevania Chronicles now rather than later. The PS1 port did add quite a few new features which will be discussed in this video. I first played through Chronicles earlier this year. After I was let down and quit Vampire Killer and Haunted Castle, I moved on to this game. And coming right off those two, Chronicles was way more enjoyable. At first. If you remember, in my Dracula's Curse video, I said this. Dracula's Curse is often considered to be the hardest game in the entire series, and while I do think that there is one game that's harder than it that we'll get to later on, welp, this is officially where we are. Castlevania Chronicles is what I would consider to be by far the hardest game in the entire series. I remember getting so freaking agitated going through some of its later stages. It was beyond brutal. I wasn't even having fun by the end of it. As I finished it, I was happy, thinking I'll never have to play it again. But oh boy was I wrong. And the worst part is, back then I played the game on the arrange mode added in the PS1 version. But for this video, I'm going to need to play both the arrange mode as well as the original mode. And from what I've heard, the original mode is way harder than arrange mode, which I already consider to be the hardest Castlevania I ever played. This right here was a video I was not looking forward to making, but if I want to cover the whole series, it's just a wall I have to break. And you know, maybe now that I'm more experienced, I'll be able to have a more comfortable time with it. I do remember liking quite a few things about the game, and hopefully I'll find even more to like now. Despite what I have said, I think coming into a game wanting to dislike it is just idiotic. Castlevania Chronicles, it's time for a rematch. Allow me to quickly lay out just a few more things. Castlevania Chronicles on the PS1 comes with two game modes, Original and Arrange. For the purposes of this video, I'll first be covering the original mode in depth, before later comparing it to the new Arrange mode and see what the PS1 version was all about. Because the original game was only called Castlevania, I'll be simply referring to it as Chronicles throughout this video, and refer to the Arrange mode when necessary. Screw you, Konami. Again, the plot is yet just another retelling of the epic tale of 1691. And you know, at the very least we do get a pretty nifty opening cutscene, which visually sets the tone for the entire game, while Super Castlevania 4 went for a slightly more, I guess, realistic art direction. I'd say Chronicles falls a lot closer to the NES games when talking of appearance, while also having some of the best sprite work I have seen in a long ass time. I have no idea how powerful the X6800 was, but what I do know is that 2D sprite-based games look absolutely gorgeous on the PS1, and Castlevania Chronicles is far from an exception. The thing I love about 2D PS1 games is how they often use 3D effects and distortions to enhance the sprite work. You can see this as soon as the game begins. A bolt of thunder strikes this tree as it slowly falls down. Sprite manipulation like this is absolute candy to my eyes, and it's all over the place here. Spinning cogs, falling bridges, these weird red lines in the death fights, oh I love it! Much like Castlevania 4, all of these stages feel alive. I love stuff like the werewolf tearing the terrain and clock numbers when fighting you, until finally using the whole damn clock hand. It's just really cool. I also like the new stage themes, such as this toy room and this beautiful ice cavern. Visual effects as well are pretty neat. Like how there's now a visual indicator to show whether the stopwatch is active or not. Before you could only tell by the sound, which is probably why the dev hated Castlevania if I had to guess. Chronicles also likes to play with the background sometimes, like with the spike trap in level 4 and these weird skeleton seesaws in the torture dungeon. They're just hanging. But speaking of, my god, the torture dungeon. So far, the series did throw a little bit of blood here and there, but likely due to Nintendo's strict guidelines, it was always pretty minimal. But this is by far the most openly graphic Castlevania has been yet. They truly managed to make this place feel like a torture dungeon. You've got a bunch of imprisoned people begging for mercy, skeletons and blood everywhere, and later on, even some legit corpses, gruesomely stored and cut apart. Some of them are even depicted as hanged and impaled right through the mouth. Holy shit. This was around the time Mortal Kombat hit the scene, which popularized violence in video games, and that is definitely displayed here, let me tell you. I do like how it's only kept to this level though. It makes it really stand out for me. And look, I have absolutely no idea what's going on with this last section visually speaking. A bunch of optical illusions and, art, but I'm pretty sure I like it. Cause yeah, Castlevania Chronicles is to this day a gorgeous game. I don't think it's the best looking in the series, but it's definitely up there, and of what we've looked at so far, this is definitely my favorite yet. I could say a similar thing about the OST. The soundtrack in Chronicles has a lot of synth, and I love me some synth. The tracks often have pretty funky vibes using some very crunchy instruments, which was a bit off-putting at first, but I did grow to really enjoy it. The remix of Wicked Child especially is a bop. On that note, the soundtrack this time around is mostly comprised of remixes from older games. And to be honest, while most of the new tracks don't stand out as much as the old ones, they are all still very fun listens, with Moonfight easily being the highlight here. But they just can't compare to the remixes we have here. We got Vampire Killer, Wicked Child, Bloody Tears, No Beginning, strangely enough, and Simon's theme from Castlevania 4. I remember getting so hyped hearing this when I first played the game, considering the theme of Simon doesn't have that many remixes. But sadly, I do think that this sound engine doesn't really do it justice and kinda butchers it. It definitely sounded better on SNES. Another thing the sound engine doesn't do justice is the sound effects. I found some sound effects like the whip and especially the cross to be pretty ear-grating. I mean, just listen to this. Blah. I did get used to them eventually, though I still think they are a bit too loud here. Now in the PS1 version you can actually turn off sound effects entirely, which is a nice option, but I also think that is just one step too far. Being able to change the volume of them at will would have definitely been preferred, but I guess that's kind of just a modern games thing here. With classic games, you take some, you lose some. So yeah, presentation, best in the series yet. Which was also my sentiment when I first played the game. But the thing that drove me mad when I first played the game was not the presentation. It was a little thing Castlevania Chronicles likes to call gameplay, because imagine if other games called it that. Structurally, it's very similar to the first game, but more. You go through 8 levels all ending with a boss battle, as well as a final boss stage. Every level contains 3 stages each. Lose a life, back to the beginning of the stage. Game over, back to the beginning of the level. Luckily, just like in the original game, the final boss stage counts as its own separate level, and as such does not penalize you for game overing. Game overing, is that a word? Simon's controls are like a mix of his Castlevania 1 and 4 incarnations. He can no longer crouch walk, jump on stairs, or freely control his whip. That last one would have been real freaking helpful here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Simon, however, does still have full control of his jumps, which is definitely appreciated. But now to the weird part. You can no longer whip above you in any way, but while in mid-air, you can still whip below you. Down straight as well as diagonally. This is really bizarre. I think what happened is that Chronicles was originally going to have 8 directional whipping, but thinking it was too overpowered, it was nerfed to 5 directional whipping. This is just a theory I came up with like 10 seconds ago, so don't take it too seriously. Being able to whip below you is still very useful here, though it is pretty easy to completely forget you can even do that. Sub-weapons are back and are just as useful as they were in the NES games, thankfully, meaning Castlevania 4's issues in that regard have been fixed. Nevertheless, sub-weapon usage is also back to how it was in the NES games. You have to hold up and press the attack button. And you see, I get that some people prefer it this way, but also the PlayStation controllers have 6 buttons that go completely unused here. The game could have just given you both options at that point. Not like I think it would be very hard to program, but what do I know? Along with the original 5, Chronicles does actually introduce one brand new sub-weapon that only ever appeared in this game, the Herb. This sub-weapon is extremely rare. You can only get it either from a random uncommon enemy drop, or from this weird Pied Piper, who only appears in the second level and then never again. He offers you some items through a game of Wheel of Fortune, and the Herb just so happens to be one of them. The Herb requires 10 hearts to use, and it does the previously unimaginable. It heals you. Yes. This sub-weapon restores your HP, and quite a lot of it at that. It's pretty costly but definitely worth it. If you somehow get this, my god, hang on it for dear life. There is no feeling worse than losing something this good, especially considering not only how little health restoring items can be found in Chronicles, I seriously only ever found 4 of them, but also considering how the damage output in Chronicles works. Oh boy. So, do you remember how in the Western version of Dracula's Curse, they made it so that how much damage you take is determined by how far into the game you are instead of what hit you? You know, in order to artificially increase the difficulty so that people would have to buy the game instead of renting it. Well, would you like to guess what fan favorite feature is back for Chronicles? Yes, the damage output here works just like in the American Dracula's Curse. First 2 levels, everything deals 2 damage. Baby shit. Level 3, everything deals 3 damage. Okay, this is pretty difficult, but I can do this. Level 4 and onwards, everything deals out 4 damage. And it stays that way for the whole game. Meaning you die in 4 hits flat. Why? Why did they bring this back, of all things? I hate this. It is such an artificially bullshit way of increasing difficulty that has no business being in a Castlevania game, and this game at that. The level design in Chronicles is quite that thing, let me tell you. Sometimes it's traditional fun Castlevania business. but then other times it's like a Kaizo ROM hack made manifest through a PS1 disc. The difficulty here just kinda flip-flops at random. It doesn't feel like a natural step like in Castlevania 4 or even the original Castlevania for that matter. Enemies are also beyond spammed here, especially these red skeletons. I mean, just look at this. Does this seem like good level design to you? And I guess this is where we have to talk about something a lot of people take issue with regarding all classic Castlevania games. Beginner's traps. Let me use this room in level 4 to describe what I mean to you. You see these two jumping skeletons over there? Well, once this skeleton from above jumps to this lower platform on the left, he and his brother will absolutely barrage you with bones, making it near impossible to climb up these stairs without getting bonked. Now, if this was, let's say, Castlevania 3, the game likely would have given you an axe here to take care of these guys. But this isn't Castlevania 3, this is Chronicles, bitch! If you want the axe in level 4, you'll have to find the super cryptic secret area, which, as a new player, you will not know about. Now how could we avoid this, you may be asking? Well, if we were to climb up the stairs here as soon as we enter this room, we'll be able to kill the two skeletons before they unite to wreck our ass. Though it doesn't help that this room has two candles 99% of new players will go to whip as soon as they enter it, giving the skeletons ample time to team up. So in short, regardless of your skill level, you are all but guaranteed to get hit here on your first playthrough. Shit like this is a constant throughout the entire game. Spiked floor traps, falling chandeliers, enemies that perfectly blend in with the background. People often blame games like the original Castlevania for this sort of design, but to that I just have to say, really? Compared to Chronicles, Castlevania 1 is like freaking Imagine Party Babies. The infamous hallway from the original game. You know, the one with the Axe Knights and Medusa heads everyone likes to bitch about. Well, that is one of the few rooms from the original game they decided to just copy and paste for Chronicles. And the kicker is, this is one of the easiest sections in Chronicles. Though, to be fair, the controllable jumps and downward whipping does make this part a hell of a lot more comfortable, but I still think it shows how overly extreme Chronicles is in comparison to the original. There is one section in Castlevania Chronicles that helps to perfectly illustrate its design philosophy, as well as everything I feel it stands for. Right at the first level, there's this breakable wall. Now in the original game, this wall had some meat that would heal you. You know, a fun secret. But in Chronicles, breaking this wall instead makes an infinite amount of fleemen show up to harass you. This is quite literally a middle finger in game design form. It's only there to screw over veteran players as well as new players. It is, and I cannot believe I am resorting to this 5-letter word, a troll. That's all the level design here is. It's just a troll after troll after troll. Trolling, while funny for a little bit, is in no way clever. It's just obnoxious. In the same way nobody wants to be with a troll, nobody wants to be with Castlevania Chronicles. This is the highest amount of times I have died in any Castlevania game I played for the channel yet. Which isn't helped by the PS1 load times. Okay, they aren't that bad, at least compared to most other PS1 games, looking at you Final Fantasy IX. But compared to the other Castlevania games, they are noticeably worse. The bosses are yet another aspect I feel mixed on. While most of them do present some pretty fun and unique challenges, a lot of them sadly share some of the issues I have with Chronicles as a whole. By itself, the werewolf battle is pretty neat. She moves all over the place and you have to keep reacting to her maneuvers, but the issue is that you die in 4 hits, and if you die, you have to go through a whole ass platforming section again, where you will more than likely get hit, putting you at a disadvantage against the werewolf. Putting a checkpoint before this battle would have honestly made all the difference. Many bosses like Medusa and the Doppelganger seem intimidating at first, and they are, before you realize you can just crouch and spam attack until they die. This is cheap, and if this were any other game, I would feel cheap. But this is not just another game, this is Castlevania Chronicles. You gotta take whatever you get here. Finishing this off, the final level isn't too bad. As per course, it's very pretty and has awesome music. But I have one qualm here. This jump near the end of the level. It's damn near pixel perfect, and if you don't make it, you die. This jump can screw off. I'm pretty sure it, by itself, doubled the time it took me to finish the level. But after getting through that, I am all but ready to get this finished. It's Dracula time. Compared to all the bullcrap you have to deal with in order to get here, Dracula is surprisingly tame. As I said, you don't have to worry about game overs, and his attacks are telegraphed a lot better here than in the NES game. In fact, I actually prefer this fight over the original overall. It's a lot more dynamic and faster paced, with Dracula's second form getting some cool new attacks. Even if it is admittedly pretty derpy, almost looks like a guy in a mascot suit, though it's not as derpy as the face Dracula makes during the first phase. Look at him, he's so happy this is finally over. And so am I, Dracula, and so am I. Dracula's defeated, and the castle collapses as Simon watches over it. I know, how subversive. And that was Castlevania Chronicles, the original mode. I'd like to make note that everything here so far was written before my planned second playthrough on Arrange mode, as I am interested to see how it will change my perspective. The 1993 quest is done and over with, but dare I ask, how will the year 2001 change it? By this point, Symphony of the Night was already out and changed how everyone saw the Castlevania name. And as it would be, Castlevania Chronicles was lucky enough to receive artwork by the one and only Ayami Kojima. I'm gonna talk more about her work when we actually get to Symphony of the Night, but I think Kojima's art on this game is also pretty interesting. While Kojima's work is mostly all well beloved, her Castlevania Chronicles contributions are a bit more divisive, with its most controversial aspect being, of course, giving Simon Belmont red hair. Oh, the heresy. And alright, this right here is a hill I am willing to die on. Maybe it's just because I'm an absolute sucker for Kojima's artwork, but I will defend Red Hair Simon until the day I die. Come on, it is an extremely cool design. How can you dislike these artworks? Are you mad? Just look at this! If this can't be considered art, then modern society has failed. But alright, I do think the main reason people dislike this design is however justified. Simon Belmont is the original Belmont. It feels wrong to give him a redesign. I do get why they did it. Simon, Christopher, Trevor, they all look practically identical. It does make sense to try and make them stand out more. However, I do think it was the wrong choice to have Simon be the one to get a redesign. I mean, really now, would anybody actually give a shit if Christopher Belmont were to get a redesign? But at the end of the day, I hope we can all at least agree that Red Hair Simon from Chronicles is better than Blue Hair Simon from Haunted Castle. Hopefully. Beating the game in Arrange mode also unlocks a gallery, where we can look at all of the artwork in its compressed PS1 glory. Though most of the artwork is actually from Symphony of the Night, weirdly enough. There is also an interview with the producer of the PS1 version of the game, Koji Igarashi. Again, we'll have more to say about him in the Symphony of the Night video. And I mean, they spend most of this interview talking about Symphony of the Night anyways. Clearly got their priorities straight there, huh? But to be fair, all of this extra stuff here is pretty neat. It does really feel like this was supposed to be a grand celebration of the Castlevania series. Too bad the game they chose to celebrate with was Chronicles though. Arrange mode actually gives us quite a few options when it comes to how we play it. There's a difficulty slider that, from my experience, only changes Simon's defenses. Stuck with normal for this playthrough. You can turn the time limit off. And as someone who completely forgot the original game even had a time limit, yeah, I think I'll just turn this off. And finally, we can change how many extra lives we have by default. And look, I already beat the game in original mode, just let me have this. Good old PS1 FMV. I love this stupid crap so much. It's basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original opening, only this time it's 3D and ugly. God, imagine if the entirety of Arrange mode looked like this. Yikes. I'm just happy with the range mode as it is, thank you very much. Simon and Dracula both get new sprites to reflect their Kojima designs, which again, I prefer, because I'm just a weirdo I guess. Other than that, it's almost visually identical, though I do really like the new cheesy stock explosions for when killing enemies. As someone born in the early aughts, stock explosions will never not be funny to me. I'm sorry, it's part of my DNA. The soundtrack has been remixed with CD quality audio, and now this is what I call music. While there are a few tracks I prefer the original versions of, for the most part, these remixes are absolute gold. Simon's theme in particular, holy crap. Love it. Best OST yet. Even the sound effects have been improved. They are all a lot more pleasant and balanced with the music far better. Arrange also offers a few gameplay tweaks. For one, Simon is no longer knocked back after getting hit. And man, as someone who has played a ton of classic Castlevania, this is pretty surreal. I'm pretty sure this is the only time classic Castlevania lets you disable knockback, well, ever. And no, Bloodstain doesn't count. Though there is a fan hack that restores the knockback to the arrange mode in case you are interested. I'm not though. And finally, most important of all, the damage system has been significantly altered in your favor. Now, everything in levels 1 and 2 deals out 1 damage, levels 3 and 4 deal out 2 damage, and levels 5 and onward deal out 3 damage. While I would definitely take a more traditional damage system over this, the better balancing is definitely appreciated, as it makes the game infinitely more fair, more manageable, and most importantly, more enjoyable. In due time, I beat Arrange mode, saw that glorious CGI ending, and fully completed Castlevania Chronicles. Finishing Arrange mode does also unlock a time attack mode, which is neat, but not really my thing, though I do find it pretty amusing that the preset times are all DRA, which stands for Dracula. I don't know why, that is just really funny. But to end this all off, I want to talk about my experience with Arrange mode, and how I think it impacted my overall opinion on Chronicles, because frankly, it kinda shocked me. Back when I first played through Chronicles, it was on Arrange mode, and I despised it with all of my might. The save file of my playthrough from back then is sadly gone due to unfortunate circumstances, but I remember game overing a whole lot, with most levels easily taking me over an hour to finish. Then my recent playthrough on original mode was similar, but I did overall find myself less agitated at the game. It was still a brutal time, but I did get through it only getting 22 game overs, which I can guarantee you is far less than my first playthrough on Arrange. But now to the most interesting part. On my most recent playthrough of Arrange, I only got 1 game over. Trust me, I was shocked too. Stages that previously took me over an hour were now conquered in less than 10 minutes. It was ridiculous. Now, the obvious answer as to why this is because I got better at the game through playing it so much, and as such, got through it faster. But you see, here's the thing, I could pick up Dracula's Curse, a game I played a lot more than Chronicles, right now, and all but guarantee you that I will game over way more than just once. And while the arrange mode is definitely easier than the original, well, 21 game overs easier? Yeah, I don't think so. I can now easily breeze through Castlevania Chronicles, a game I have previously declared to be one of the hardest I have ever played, and here's why. As I said earlier, Castlevania Chronicles is hard because it constantly trolls you. When you first go through it, I can guarantee that no matter your skill level, you will struggle. But here's the interesting thing about trolls. Once you know their tricks, you know exactly how they operate and every trap they've got set up, they become pushovers. Beginner's traps are only effective on, well, beginners. If you've played Chronicles more than twice, you will already be acquainted with most of them, and just like that, as a flip of a switch, Castlevania Chronicles transforms from one of the hardest games in the series into, and I cannot believe I am saying this, one of the more manageable ones. I take back what I said earlier. Dracula's Curse is the hardest Castlevania game, not Chronicles. Chronicles is just the cheapest one, and you know, I had a surprising amount of fun going through the game on arrange mode for this video. Dare I say, even more than Castlevania 4? At the time I started it, I planned on only going through the first level before leaving the rest of the game for another day, but I ended up going through the whole thing in one session. I could easily see myself coming back and replaying this one a lot. In arrange mode at the very least. And heck, with the time attack mode, I'm almost even drawn into wanting to try and speedrun it. And I never want to speedrun games, yet I can see Chronicles being a very solid speed game. After all of that, I do really enjoy Castlevania Chronicles, but here is our issue. In order to finally enjoy Castlevania Chronicles, I basically had to suffer going through some of the worst level design in all of Castlevania, while at the very least enjoying the great presentation. Is it really worth going through all of that pain? I don't think so. While Castlevania Chronicles does become very fun if you put a lot of time into it, we do have to take into account that many other Castlevania games, and heck, video games in general, are fun right out of the gate. They don't require you to familiarize yourself with their obtuse design all just so that you can enjoy them. So, at the end of the day, unless you're a huge Castlevania fan like me, I sadly can't recommend this one. On my Castlevania totem pole, I'd say it ranks below Belmont's Revenge, but above both Kid Dracula games. And you know, despite me still thinking it's not a very well designed game at all, I am definitely glad I came back to it for this video, as my overall opinion on Chronicles has definitely increased thanks to it, which is always great to see. Again, I think hating on video games just for the sake of it is stupid. Video games are supposed to be entertaining, so I'd say the least you could do is try to be entertained. Some good life lessons right there, I guess. To anyone who happens to celebrate it, happy Halloween. And to anyone who happens to watch this, I just hope you have some happy times. If you have watched this far in, you've definitely made my time happy, that's for sure. Now that October is closing, the Castlevania Marathon is about to go on another break. But before you know it, it will come back from the grave just as Dracula would, only it won't take 100 years. I hope. And if I were you, I'd be pretty hyped, as next in line, we have Castlevania Rondo of Blood, a definite fan favorite, so stay tuned for that, as well as everything else I've got cooking up. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll hopefully see you all next time.